The company is a Canadian energy company called Pembina. Basically, they want to build this 36-inch high-pressured fracked gas pipeline from Southeast Oregon to Coos Bay to ship gas overseas. So it's this huge, massive pipeline that would connect to a pre-existing pipeline, transport gas to a big terminal that would then liquefy it in Coos Bay, put it on tankers, and then ship it overseas. And as you guys know, there's a myriad of reasons we don't want this project, from the environmental impacts to private property owners, and everything in between. And, you know, Rogue Riverkeeper's been working on it for years and years just because of the impacts it would have on the river and the tributary streams and fish habitat in the upper Rogue Basin. So we've been really concerned about it and just keep fighting it back and stalling it as much as possible and doing what we can to educate the public.
And it really just winds right through the Rogue watershed and just really comes down through and crosses and is proposed to cross under the Rogue. Is that right?
Right, right. Yeah, so I think in its entirety, the pipeline route would impact or cross roughly 485 different waterways. So that's wetlands and it's streams and it's the Klamath River, the Rogue River, the Umpqua, the Coquille, the Coos, and then massive parts of Coos Bay. But for the Rogue itself, it would come through the upper part of the Rogue Basin and really impact tributary streams like Big Butte Creek and Little Butte Creek and Trail Creek, and really important, you know, those important feeder streams for the main stem of the Rogue that provide clear, cold water and fish habitat and those types of things. And then what the company wants to do is do a horizontal directional drill underneath the Rogue River.
Wow.
So the pipeline it'd be under the river, but there's a lot of potential impacts through like what's called frack outs. So if the bedrock fractures, drilling fluids could come up into the main stem of the river.
You mean like during construction?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's really important fish habitat where they want to build, where they want to put the pipe underneath. And, you know, landowners on either side of the river, they got to cut down streamside vegetation. And so, yeah, lots of potential impacts there and concerns for
I mean, the construction alone, you know, going through the watershed, if I understand it right, the path that needs to be created for it is just enormous, right? And it's probably even more of a buffer in our region that's so prone to fire and stuff. So I would imagine it's kind of the maximum they can ask for. And I understand it's maybe 90 feet total, is that?
Yeah, so from the center, like where the pipeline would go, it's 45 feet, I believe, or 50 feet on either side, so roughly around 100 feet. Just clear cuts through our public lands and private lands. And
so that's like, what, like I-5, would you say? That's kind of like the width
probably
of a normal freeway interstate?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, and then building roads, you know, for access and easements and whatnot. So there's even more impact. It's not just like cutting it out for a pipe. It's roads and traffic and trucks and sedimentation and you know,
I mean, that stuff's so fragile, right? It's really, you know, what we know of it, and just working with other conservation groups in the area and the lengths that we go through to rehabilitate all these streams that we have been doing for years for steelhead. I mean, just to go in and kind of make that trade, so to speak, you know, for this industry is hard to swallow a little bit,
Right, and that's a really good point, and we try to bring that up a lot, is that the state of Oregon in itself has spent millions and millions of dollars on dam removal and habitat restoration and, you know, planting trees alongside rivers and streams to provide more shade and like bring back our salmon and steelhead populations and try to help them succeed and flourish. And this project just completely negates all of that, all of those efforts.
Yeah,
really.
And I would say too that it's not hard to see that the Rogue is kind of a shining example of what can happen with that. You know, I think we have some of the more consistent runs of fish. We have a couple that are in trouble out of 4 or 5 different main anadromous runs we have in the Rogue, but I think a lot of them are in quite good shape as far as that goes in our sort of modern era.
Yeah.
But it's hard to see that, with that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And in their plans for construction, at least, it requires trenching, damming, blasting these really sensitive creeks and streams and feeder streams to put this giant pipe in. And you can't, I mean, a third grader knows that that's going to have impact on where fish live and, depend on for their habitat. So, and then their solution to that is like, oh, well, we'll just mitigate for that somewhere else. We'll create more habitat out in Coos Bay somewhere. It's like, you don't mitigate for impacts to salmon in the Rogue River in Coos Bay. It's not, there's like no comparison there. You don't just get to like screw something up here and then create a new playground over here. Like it doesn't, it's just not how it works.
Yeah, that's
it doesn't work that way.
Insane to think about that. It's just a complete, shows just a complete lack of understanding of how these species, exist, what they need to exist. And these wild fish are something that we're just trying so hard to rehabilitate and just invested so much in. Again, like you said, like the dams coming out. Yeah. I mean, you could even look at the hatchery argument and people that, enjoy the hatchery fish to take home and like, putting all that at risk too. I mean, here's a thing that we support as taxpayers, thousands and thousands of dollars to keep this hatchery open and like, and then, well, we're going to, put this thing right down through the two, which kind of jeopardizes all that as well. It just seems like every level, the amount of risk involved to what's downstream is just like enormous.
Yeah, it's ludicrous. Yeah, and it's interesting because if you look at the geography alone of the route that they want to take and where they want to put this giant pipeline through crazy fire-prone forests and like huge, ridges, mountainous ridges and landslide-prone areas and giant seismic potential on our coast. It's like, it makes absolutely no sense, really. So all those other pieces kind of fall into place for them, and you got enough money, you can do anything, really, is what their mentality is, I think. But just geography alone, to me, I just look at the route and what it would entail, and it just is like, I just don't understand it. Like, there's no way.
Yeah, the seismic issues are huge, out there and on the coast. And we've been hearing for years about the potential for a real good shakeup around here, and it just seems like,
there's going to be impacts. Like, there's no argument around that. Just construction is going to have impacts. It just will, because that's how you put a pipe through a stream or whatever it is. And then there's potential risks, right? Like maybe there could be a frack out into the Rogue, or maybe there could be an explosion because of a pipe leaking and our forest could catch on fire, or whatever. And those are potential threats. But regardless, there's still going to be huge impacts to our waterways and to the climate. And that's the other big piece, is if this project is built, it is going to become the largest greenhouse gas emitter for the state of Oregon. And our governor right now is standing on this climate action platform saying we need to, move towards renewables and do all this stuff for the state, and yet still not saying anything about this project whatsoever. And so there's a lot of people that are really trying to hold her feet to the fire simply because of the climate impacts that this would have. And we see like our snowpack in this area is not great anymore. It's really sad, and then that has a huge impact on our rivers every year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the fish and all of it. So, the Rogue's already listed as many of its tributaries and the main stems too warm. Yeah. And algae blooms and everything else that comes along with that. And so I think, they talk a lot about all the jobs it's going to bring to Oregon, and the fact of the matter is that they're going to import most of the people to come and do this work because we just don't have trained folks,
Sure.
you know, that live here that know how to build giant frac gas pipelines. And then it's really going to impact the pre-existing jobs, you know, whether it's in tourism on the Rogue or in Coos Bay, most definitely, like the fishing industry there and crabbing and
Sure.
all of those types of things. And I think that's a really important piece, and especially around some of these state-issued permits, because the job of these agencies is really to protect these waterways. Like, that is their job. It's in their mission statement. It's in their statutes. And so I believe that it's really our job to just keep showing up and reminding them, this is your job, and this is why we love living here, and this is what we depend on, and you need to protect this resource for us.
Yeah.
So the state of Oregon has every opportunity to stop this project by denying one of these permits. Like, if they deny the removal fill permit, it's done. It's over. The federal government, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, is like the big overarching entity that approves or denies energy projects. They usually just kind of rubber stamp these and let them go through. They actually denied this project 2 years ago, which was unheard of. But we're just expecting them to say yes to this, and where we really think we can stop it is on the state level. So whether it's Department of State Lands permits or Department of Environmental Quality, those are probably the two where we have the most opportunity.
Right.
So right now it's really, really important for folks, especially river users and people that depend on the Rogue and its fish, whether you're just a recreational angler or a business owner or a guide or whoever it is. But it's really important that folks speak up and submit comments, whether it's just, I mean, it can be as simple as like, I depend on this river for my livelihood, I'm a guide, and if there's any impacts, it's really gonna mess things up for me, to, you know, pages and pages of detailed comments. So yeah, really important to have folks get their voices heard and just get those submitted, and they can do that through our website or the Department of State Lands webpage too. You can just type in Jordan Cove, and then they have a whole link to where to mail it or email it. And the comment period ends February 3rd. And then basically the department will take 30 days to review thousands of comments, and then make a decision based on what they've heard. And we just went through hearings last week that were amazing and so well attended, and the opposition was huge all across the state. So we'll kind of see what happens moving on from there. But yeah, really important for folks to get their voices heard and get comments in and just voice their concerns. And
gosh, thank you so much, Robyn. We really appreciate your time and all of your effort, and Rogue Riverkeeper's effort involved in this project, and keeping us all educated and knowing. I mean, I have to be honest, you know, I remember having a lot of activity around this, and then just getting kind of fatigued about it, you know, and just going through this like, oh my God, here it's like coming, you know, so really appreciate your effort to make sure everybody knows, you know, the timeline and what we can all do to show up and try to keep this area the way that we love it. So
you bet. Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, I really appreciate your efforts too, and just helping educate folks and letting people know what they can do.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.